Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Last night, the first college football playoff rankings were released, and as promised, I'm going to give you my breakdown of the rankings, see if I agree with what the committee selected, and we're going to give you my analysis, maybe some playoff predictions. So we're going to jump right into it and look at our first college football playoff top 25 for Week 10. So the top four is what everybody's most concerned about. Georgia jumped Alabama for the #1 spot in the rankings. They claim the top spot right now. Alabama, of course, a very close second at #2. Notre Dame at 3 and Clemson at 4. So if the playoffs were to happen today, it'd be Clemson versus Georgia and Notre Dame versus Alabama, a rematch of the 2012 National Championship. So, top four, I got to say I agree with it. You can kind of see that they put more emphasis on the resume, putting Georgia above Alabama, with Georgia getting that key road win at Notre Dame, who is #3 in the country. Alabama, the win over Florida State in the first week of the season isn't looking as impressive right now. Now Florida State is 2-5. They share a few common opponents, but Georgia overall does end up having the better resume, and that's why they were able to jump Alabama for that one spot. Notre Dame, sitting there at #3 right now. The only loss coming to Georgia, of course. So obviously that's not a horrible loss to have. So that's why they're at #3. And you can see that I thought it was interesting that they put in Clemson at #4. They did lose that game earlier in the season to Syracuse on the road. I think they took into account that Kelly Bryant, their starting quarterback, was out for the second half of that game and that they only lost by 3 points. So I think that's why they ended up getting the #4 spot above Oklahoma and Ohio State. And that was a key point a lot of people were wanting to look at, is where Oklahoma and Ohio State would be ranked. And I'm glad that Oklahoma's above Ohio State, seeing that the committee put more emphasis on head-to-head results. And I agree with that completely. Head-to-head results matter much more, I think, than maybe strength of schedule or anything else. Oklahoma going on the road and defeating Ohio State in Week 2. That's why they got the 5 spot over the Buckeyes, despite Ohio State defeating Penn State this weekend, who also is below Ohio State due to the head-to-head result there. So I agree with really the top 7, and the top 6, more than anything else, is what matters the most in the college football playoff rankings. It's the top 4 that make it, and obviously it's the 2 teams that just missed the cut. So that's obviously the biggest deal in these rankings. We got Wisconsin and Miami down here, 9 and 10. Now, if you go look back at the AP poll, I believe Wisconsin was actually #4, and Miami was also pretty high ranked. I think they were 6th or 7th at the time, but the committee looked at it and looked at their strength of schedule and the teams they have played this season. They don't really have any quality wins, high-quality wins for either of these guys. It's a very weak schedule so far. Miami, though, that could change this week as they play Virginia Tech, who is 13th. So if they can get a win over the Hokies, I think they will definitely jump, and I'll give them that signature win they need. Wisconsin, though, probably won't get their signature win until the Big Ten Championship if they can defeat whoever that would be. Right now, it would be Ohio State. So they're going to need to really win out and win the Big Ten Championship if they have any chance of making it into the top 4. So that's something to keep your eye on. And then, a lot of people don't put too much thought into 11 through 25 because, like I said, it's the top 4 and the top 6 that matter most to people. But, I like to really look at it and see where the committee ranked these guys. We got Oklahoma State on the outside right now, obviously losing earlier in the season, so they're sitting at 11th. But I think the rankings overall are going to change big time this weekend. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. Oklahoma State does face Oklahoma. That has huge playoff implications. We have Miami versus Virginia Tech. That has huge playoff implications. All in all, there are 7 ranked versus ranked matchups this Saturday. So keep your eye on that. That's going to really shake up these college football playoff rankings. It's going to be really big. And some of these guys that are playing unranked teams have the potential to get upset. They have some fairly tough matchups. Iowa State is traveling on the road to West Virginia. Not a bad team. West Virginia is actually a 2-point favorite right now. So that's something to keep your eye on. And I think it was Kirk Herbstreit who last night said, could you imagine if Iowa State had defeated Iowa in Week 2 of the season? Imagine where they'd be ranked right now instead of number 15. They could easily be in the top 10. And I mentioned that in my last video too, that I thought those 2 losses to Iowa and Texas would end up hurting the Cyclones because those were against mediocre teams. And it didn't hurt them too much. 15th is a very respectable spot for a team that hadn't been ranked since 2005. But if they had just gotten one of those wins over one of those teams, they would definitely be contenders right now. And they still could be if they went out and win the Big 12 championship. Auburn leads the pack right now for the 2-loss teams. They are the highest ranked 2-loss team in the college football playoff rankings. They've still got the potential to maybe slip into the top 4, but it's going to take a lot of work. They've still got to face #1 Georgia and #2 Alabama in the upcoming weeks, and then they would have to win the SEC championship on top of that. So, get their work cut out for them, but Auburn could easily make a run, make a push if they wanted to. Washington, their strength of schedule has not been too challenging either. They lost that game to Arizona State earlier on in the season, which isn't looking too good right now. They would probably need to win out as well and win the Pac-12 championship if they want to make the college football playoff for the second straight year. We got Mississippi State ahead of LSU, head-to-head matchup there. LSU, I think, has been looking really well. Mississippi State, though, went on the road and defeated A&M, I think, by 21 points. So they're still looking great as well. 16th is a very respectable spot there. If you look, remember the highest-ranked group of 5 school is the one that will represent their conference in the New Year's Six Bowl. Right now, that would go to Central Florida. They're ranked 18th. The closest school is Memphis, sitting at 23rd. So right now, Central Florida would hold the tiebreaker right now. They're undefeated. And I don't see them tripping up anywhere else. Even if they were to lose one game, as long as it's to a respectable opponent, they should be able to make that New Year's Six Bowl. Memphis, I think, has a much tougher schedule down the stretch. Washington State, 25th. They're lucky to still be in the college football playoff top 25. As they, like I said earlier in my video last week, they lost to California early in the season, and then Arizona, who right now is sitting at 22nd. Khalil Tate has just been on fire for Arizona. They're still Pac-12 contenders right now. 22nd is a good spot for them if they can continue to rack up the wins. I think they're playing maybe USC this week, who's sitting at 17th. That would be a huge win for them. I expect them to rise in their rankings. So all in all, I agree for the most part with these rankings. I'm glad that the committee put emphasis on head-to-head matchups. That matters more to me. Like I said, these rankings I think are going to change drastically after this week. Like I said, we have 7 ranked versus ranked matchups, and I think a couple of these guys will get upset by unranked teams that are respectable opponents. Nothing too major, but we will have a few losses in there as well. So this is really going to change by next Tuesday when the committee releases their next set of rankings. For the top 4 right now, Georgia, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Clemson. It's going to be very interesting to see how this shapes up, how this ends up staying. Clemson does have a tough game this week against North Carolina State, and that is on the road. And like I said, North Carolina State is still in the running to win their division in the ACC. That would be huge for them to knock off the number 4 team in the country, and I think that would almost put Clemson out of the running. To lose another game, that'd be 2 conference losses for the Tigers. I think that would put them out, and North Carolina State is not an easy team at all to defeat, and especially with it being on the road, so that's a tough matchup for the Tigers. Notre Dame still has a couple key games down the stretch. They face Stanford later on. Assuming Stanford doesn't slip up anywhere else, I think they're playing Washington State this week. So that's going to be key. As long as Notre Dame can play through, they don't play in a conference championship game. So as they win out, they'll have plenty of key resume games on their schedule. Only loss coming to Georgia. I think they're a lot for the playoff if they don't slip up anywhere else. So right now, things are looking great. Obviously, the key right now is the Georgia-Alabama potential for meeting in the SEC championship. Assuming none of them slip up down the stretch, that's what will happen. And the major question is, will both be able to make it? Will both schools be able to make the college football playoff, assuming the loser of the SEC championship game loses in a close one? And I think yes. I think if the loser of that game, now they're both undefeated, if they lose a close battle in that game, I cannot imagine a one-loss SEC team, considering they're both Georgia and Alabama, missing out on the college football playoff. I expect both of them to make it, assuming none of them slip up in the regular season. They still have tough games down the stretch, but I don't see it happening. So I think Georgia and Alabama will be in there. And then if Notre Dame makes it, you're kicking out 2 of the Power 5 conferences. Potentially 2 Power 5 conferences. You'd either kick out the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the Pac-12. Right now the Big 12, Big 10, and Pac-12 Washington, who is the highest ranked Pac-12 team. So if these 3 teams end up making the playoffs, you're kicking out 2 Power 5 conferences, and that would cause a whole stir of controversy and everything. Probably more calls to make the playoff expanded to 8 teams. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future, but that's definitely going to cause a lot of discussion if the things play out as they do right now. So keep that in mind. This has been a great. I think I really agree for the most part with these rankings. Don't see any controversy whatsoever. I think the committee finally has their head on straight, kind of figured everything out the way it needs to be. We'll see what happens next week because, like I said, we're going to have tons of these guys are going to lose. The rankings are really going to shake up by next Tuesday. So make sure you keep your eye on that. I'm going to go more in depth about these games on Friday when we do our Week 10 preview. Like I said, we got 7 ranked versus ranked matchups, so I'm going to have tons of info on that, tons of analysis on that. So make sure you tune in to that on Friday. Thank you for watching. Enjoy your weekend of college football, and we'll see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.